Ever notice how every tin of tuna in a UK supermarket looks basically the same? Blue label, red label, a fish that's never actually been photographed for that can. Shoppers grab whichever one's on offer and move on, because tuna feels like one of those foods that's impossible to get wrong. It's just fish in a tin. What could possibly be hiding in there? Quite a lot, as it turns out. I went through the sourcing records, the Greenpeace rankings, the ownership structures, and the official Mercury guidance for 8 of the UK's most bought tuna brands. Some of this stuff has been public for over a decade, and most shoppers have never heard a word of it. 2 brands here spent years at the bottom of independent sustainability tables, while marketing themselves as the responsible choice. One of the UK's biggest tuna brands made a public promise back in 2011 and completely failed to keep it. By the end of this, I'll show you which tins are actually worth trusting, and it might not be the brand you're expecting. Number 8. John West. This is the tuna most British households grew up with. It's been in UK cupboards since 1857, and it's still one of the biggest brands out there, making up roughly a third of everything sold in the tuna aisle. John West is owned by Thai Union Group, a Thai seafood giant. That's the same company whose fishing operations were the subject of a Pulitzer Prize-winning AP investigation into forced labor at sea. Men trafficked onto boats and held for months without pay. That investigation wasn't about John West directly. But Thai Union sits at the top of the supply chain, so it's worth knowing whose name is actually behind that mermaid-free British branding. Here's the part that's entirely on John West, though. Back in 2011, the company publicly promised that by 2016, all its tuna would come from sustainable sources like pole and line fishing. When Greenpeace UK checked back once the deadline hit, they found only around 2% of John West tuna actually met it. The other 98%? Still coming from destructive industrial methods, mostly fish aggregating devices. These are floating rafts that lure in entire ecosystems, not just tuna. Sharks, turtles, rays, juvenile fish too small to legally sell. All of it gets scooped up and tossed as bycatch. Greenpeace's UK Tuna League table ranked John West dead last, multiple years running, and accused the brand of trashing the oceans for cheap tuna. To be fair, John West has since committed to phasing out FAD-caught tuna completely. It's the last of the UK's major brands to make that pledge, years after every supermarket already had. That's progress, but it only came after being publicly shamed into it, and it's worth remembering the promise it broke the first time before trusting the next one. Number 7. Prince's. If John West is the UK's biggest tuna brand, Prince's is the second, and the two of them have basically taken turns sitting at the bottom of Greenpeace's table for years. Prince's is owned by Mitsubishi Corporation, one of the biggest trading companies on the planet. Its sourcing has been called out repeatedly for leaning hard on fish aggregating devices, with Greenpeace at one point estimating around 75% of its supply came through that method. Prince's also sells Big Eye tuna, a species the IUCN lists as vulnerable, at a time when most UK retailers had already stopped stocking it. When Greenpeace put out its league table, Prince's own corporate team admitted publicly they were disappointed with the ranking, while insisting they were committed to improving. That's honest at least. But sitting at the bottom of an independent sustainability ranking for the better part of a decade isn't a branding problem. It's a sourcing choice, made again and again, long after the rest of the market had moved on. Number 6. Lidl's Nixa range. Budget tuna brands don't get anywhere near the scrutiny that Heinz-tier household names do, and Nixa is a good example of why that's a problem. When Lidl's own-label tuna brand entered Greenpeace's UK league table for the first time, it landed third from bottom, with the organisation estimating that close to 80% of Nixie's tuna at the time was caught using unsustainable methods. That's a genuinely striking figure for a supermarket-owned brand competing directly against Aldi and Asda on price, and it went almost entirely unreported outside of trade press. Budget tuna doesn't have to mean unsustainable tuna. Plenty of cheap own-label lines from other supermarkets prove that. But Nix's early sourcing record shows exactly what happens when a retailer prioritizes shelf price over supply chain scrutiny. And it's a reminder that a low price tag on tinned fish is sometimes a much more direct signal than shoppers realize. Number 5. Tesco's standard range. Tesco has actually done reasonably well on Greenpeace's rankings over the years, and it's worth giving credit where it's due. Tesco was one of the earlier UK supermarkets to commit to pole and line sourcing across its own label tuna, with Greenpeace crediting its own campaigning for pushing Tesco to switch fully by the end of 2012. Where Tesco earns its spot on this list is different. As the UK's biggest grocery retailer, Tesco's tuna moves through one of the largest, most anonymous seafood systems in the country. Contracts for the everyday value end of the aisle go to whichever processor delivers cheapest that quarter. That means the exact facility, sometimes the exact ocean the fish came from, can shift without any change to the label on the shelf. There's no named fishery on the budget tins, no independently disclosed species verification beyond the legal minimum. That's not a scandal. It's just what value sourcing looks like at scale. But in other words, it means the transparency Tesco has earned on sustainability doesn't automatically tell you which boat your specific tin came from. Number 4. Asda. Asda's own label tuna sits in a similar position to Tesco's, mid-table on Greenpeace's sustainability rankings, having made its own pole and line commitments some years back. But Asda's tuna sourcing has drawn more specific criticism around transparency than some of its rivals. Consumer reviews across retailer sites and forums repeatedly raise the same complaints. Batches that vary noticeably in water content from one tin to the next, and ring-pull lids that fail more often than shoppers expect from a supermarket-owned brand. None of that is a food safety issue, but it points to the same underlying pattern as Tesco, a supply chain built around hitting a price point first, with consistency and disclosure trailing some distance behind. Number 3. Morrisons. Morrisons doesn't attract anywhere near the attention that John West or Prince's does, largely because it isn't a household brand name being marketed nationally. It's just the own label tuna sitting quietly on a Morrisons shelf. That relative invisibility is exactly the problem. Morrisons has historically placed lower than Sainsbury's, Tesco, Waitrose, and the Co-op on Greenpeace's sustainability table, and because it doesn't run the kind of national tuna advertising campaigns that John West does, there's very little public pressure or media scrutiny pushing it to close that gap. A supermarket-owned brand with a mid-table sustainability record and almost no external accountability is a genuinely under-discussed problem in this category, precisely because there's no dramatic headline attached to it. That's 6 brands in, and the pattern should be pretty clear by now. The 2 biggest household names in UK tuna have spent over a decade at the bottom of independent rankings, while several supermarket-owned labels have quietly coasted in the mid-table without ever being pushed to improve. If this kind of digging is useful to you, subscribing genuinely helps more people see it before their next big shop. No sponsorships behind this channel, just pulling apart what's actually on the shelf. Now for the brands that are genuinely worth your trust, because unlike some categories, UK tuna actually has a small number of standout options that have earned their reputation rather than just marketed their way to it. Number 1. Sainsbury's. Across more than a decade of Greenpeace's UK Tuna League table, Sainsbury's has consistently ranked first or very close to it. It pledged as far back as the early 2010s to sell only pole and line caught tuna across all its nearly 550 stores. That's not a recent rebrand. It's a sourcing commitment the retailer has held onto through multiple table updates, at a time when John West and Prince's were still failing to meet promises they'd made years earlier. Sainsbury's premium Taste the Difference range goes even further, using MSC-certified skipjack and albacore, with some lines sourced as ventresca, the tuna belly cut prized for its texture, caught through verified pole and line methods rather than industrial nets. When an independent body ranks a brand at the top year after year, not just once, that's not a marketing claim anymore. That's a track record. Number 2. Waitrose and Marks & Spencer. I'm grouping these 2 together because their sourcing records have run almost identically for years. Both use 100% pole and line, or MSC-certified skipjack tuna, across their entire canned range, and both have sat consistently at or near the top of Greenpeace's rankings since the league table began. Waitrose's own fisheries manager has confirmed on record that every single tin of tuna sold under the Waitrose name, including the tuna used in pre-made sandwiches and pâtés, carries Marine Stewardship Council certification. That's a meaningfully higher bar than just printing a sustainability logo on a premium-looking tin. It's independently verified sourcing applied across the whole range, not just the flagship product. Number 3. Aldi. This is the one that genuinely surprised Greenpeace's own researchers. When Aldi and Lidl were both added to the league table for the first time, the 2 budget retailers went in completely opposite directions. Aldi entered in a solid 5th place, ahead of both John West and Prince's, having hit its own 2016 sustainability target a year early. Its managing director of buying confirmed that all canned tuna sold under the Aldi name in the UK and Ireland used only responsible catching methods designed to minimize impact on endangered species like sea turtles. That's a genuinely rare result for a discount retailer. Proof that a low shelf price and a credible sourcing record aren't mutually exclusive, as long as the retailer actually commits to it, which is exactly the commitment Lidl's Nixe brand was still catching up on at the same point. So what should you actually check for, standing in the aisle with two nearly identical tins in your hand? Look for the words pole and line, or troll caught, printed clearly on the front, not buried in small print on the back. Look for the Marine Stewardship Council mark, the little blue fish logo, because that's independently audited rather than self-reported. And if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or trying to conceive, know the mercury guidance that applies specifically to you. The Food Standards Agency and NHS advise limiting tuna in that case to no more than 4 medium tins a week, roughly 140 grams drained weight each, or 2 fresh tuna steaks, because methylmercury crosses the placental barrier and can affect a developing nervous system. For most other adults, there's no specific weekly limit on canned tuna. Skipjack, the species used in most standard tins, carries roughly half the mercury of albacore, simply because it's a smaller, shorter-lived fish. That's genuinely useful info buried in FSA guidance that almost nobody reads before they're standing in the aisle trying to pick between 2 tins that look exactly the same. Here's the actual takeaway from all of this. Tinned tuna in the UK isn't the horror story some viral videos make it out to be. Several of Britain's biggest retailers have spent over a decade building genuinely verified, independently audited supply chains. Greenpeace's Tuna League table is proof that 15 years of public pressure has actually worked, forcing even the worst offenders to eventually clean up their act. But 2 of the biggest brand names on UK shelves spent years failing to meet their own public promises, and it took sustained campaigning, not goodwill, to move them. Reputation and shelf presence tell you almost nothing about a fishing method. The certification on the tin does. Next time you're stood in that aisle, spend the extra 10 seconds checking for it. On tuna specifically, the gap between the best and worst options on the shelf isn't hidden in confusing small print. It's printed right there on the front, if you know what you're actually looking for.